Welcome back to the PI show. Before the break we were talking about medical negligence and cases to do with hospitals and doctors. The leading case in Australia on what's called failure to warn of risks of surgery is a case of Rogers and Whittaker. Mrs. Whittaker was I think a housewife.
Correct.
And when she was 9 years old, she had
an accident where her right eye was penetrated with a stick.
Yep. And then she lost the use of her right eye.
That's right.
When she was in her mid-40s, she thought she'd go see a doctor about whether the right eye could be fixed cosmetically.
Improved
Cosmetically, and also maybe she could have gained some vision in the right eye. And she consulted Mr. Rogers, who was a surgeon.
Dr. Rogers, yes, he was an ophthalmic surgeon.
And things went wrong. What happened?
Well, unfortunately, Mrs. Whittaker was a lady who had questioned the doctor in relation to the risks being carried out.
Well, she's very conscious. She'd lost the use of her right eye from childhood, so
that's right.
She didn't want
anything. She was very concerned about the left eye.
The left eye. The operation on the right eye wouldn't affect the left eye at all.
That's right.
So she asked Mr. Rogers a lot of questions.
She did.
And this was a bizarre set of circumstances, right?
Well,
as it transpires.
As it transpires, what happened was she had the operation on the right eye.
She had the operation,
and there was an infection that spread into her left eye.
Left eye. That's correct.
And she ended up blind.
Blind, totally blind.
Yeah. So she was in New South Wales. She sued Mr. Rogers. And right. What happened?
Well, the court actually found that there was a 1 in 14,000 chance that this sort of complication could occur. They discussed whether Dr. Rogers should have warned her of this rare complication. After all, he had probably, I'm sure that he would have warned her on other infections or bleeding, but had not gone to the extent of warning her that, particularly with a past history of a penetrating eye injury, that there was a little bit more of a risk of sympathetic ophthalmia. Is what the term.
Well, what was significant was the fact that she raised the issue of.
She had raised the issue.
What do you think about my good eye? Is there a risk? Is there a risk? And she was very concerned about.
She was very. Yeah. She was vigilant.
So the court in New South Wales found in her favour. I think the damages were significant.
Significant.
What?
800,000.
She was awarded $800,000. I think there was some suggestion she was going to return to the workforce.
Yes, there was a suggestion.
And being blind, she couldn't return to the workforce in effect. And then I think Mr. Rogers appealed to the High Court, and the High Court dismissed the case.
They dismissed the case on the basis that he should have warned her of the fact that there was.
Geez, you wouldn't bet a horse at 14,001, would you?
No, it's a very remote. Prospect. That things go wrong in that sense.
It is remote.
And but the High Court said, look, even if it's remote, you've still got to warn people that there is some risk and it is remote. And then would Mrs. Whittaker have changed her mind?
Well, she might have chosen
not to have the operation.
Well, it's obvious that she would say that she wouldn't have had it in hindsight, because I mean it just makes sense.
That's difficult.
But I think also what came out in evidence was the fact that she said that if she knew that there was some risk, she would have gone shopping around to find the best surgeon that she could possibly find in the circumstances.
Correct.
I think that came out in evidence as well.
But the High Court said, look, you've got to warn of even remote risks to people and give them options, and then if they choose to go ahead and accept the risk, then they've got no remedy if things do go wrong.
Well, that's right.
Following on from that, there was another interesting case at Chapel and Hart. What happened there?
Chapel and Hart, there was Mrs. Hart.
She was a teacher librarian.
Yep.
That was her job, and she'd entered into elective surgery to have an pharyngeal pouch removed from her esophagus, which is food pipe.
The food
Let's
pipe.
say there's a little pouch down in the food
And
pipe.
she would have had trouble swallowing.
She would have had reflux and associated.
Yeah,
she would have
had
been
trouble
on
swallowing.
medications. And
So she
all
saw a
sorts of
doctor and
things.
wanted to get rid of this problem.
That's correct. So
And she saw Mr. Chappell.
Dr. Chappell.
Yep.
So she went to Dr. Chappell and questioned Dr. Chappell
About the risk.
about the risks, and in particular, she questioned him in relation to whether there was a possibility that she could lose her voice.
Yeah, she said, she
Such
specifically
as-
said to him
that's
she
right.
didn't want to finish up with a one of these
Gravel
Neville
voices.
Rand,
Right.
yeah, former
But
Premier of
in
New
particular, she
South Wales.
particularly pointed that out
Yeah.
and asked
So-
the doctor for his
So,
advice.
but you know, she was aware of risk, and then something did go wrong in the actual operation, or there's
That's
a
correct.
complication. The doctor performed the operation. There was a complication.
That's right. But Dr. Chappell did warn
Did
the
warn her
patient that there
was a
could
risk.
be a risk of perforating the esophagus.
But that's not what
Food
caused the
pipe.
problem.
Well,
Problem came on because of an infection.
but there was a perforation and the infection ensued from the mediastinitis, which is what she got, and then via this infection of the mediastinum, it affected her laryngeal nerve and thus loss of voice.
She lost in the end. She
Loss
did
of
lose her
voice.
voice.
And what she do for work?
She's a teacher librarian.
Okay,
So it's pretty fundamental to her occupation.
Absolutely.
And again, that case I think went to the High Court,
Went to the High Court from the Supreme Court.
and
Of
the
New
High
South Wales.
Court she won in the first instance.
Yes, successful.
And what was the damages she was
At
awarded?
170,000.
Sounds
Something
light,
like that.
Tony.
It is like,
Sounds light.
Jesus, I don't get
What?
a lot of sign writing going on, but it sounds like to me.
But that was the awarded damages, and then the matter went to the High Court, and the High Court said, look, again, failure to warn of risks.
That's right.
And
Yes.
the courts generally have said, with doctors and the standard of care, what's the standard of care for doctors now in Victoria? What standard of care do they have to perform in order to defend a claim against negligence?
It's Section 59 of the Wrongs Act,
Thank you,
please,
Tony.
those,
Yeah.
Harry, which
That's right.
basically says you've got to assess your peers have got to look at it, and
So
It's
all
assessed on the peer.
the
Their
peer
group of-
opinion.
That's peer opinion, their specialisation.
So if the peer opinion says that it's a reasonable operation and they've done everything in a reasonable way, that is a group of doctors.
That's right.
But aren't doctors like a club, and they all sort of gang up together and protect each other?
Well, look, doctors do their best, as we all know.
I
and
agree.
things happen that,
Yeah. Do go wrong.
and we don't always have,
Jennifer,
doctors
Harry,
don't always have
we've got to
control
go to the
over it.
sponsors break.
A sponsors break, and after the break we'll come back with some more discussion about medical negligence.